youth comprises of about 16% of the global 8 million population that we just reached last week. And in Sri Lanka, it's about a quarter of the 22 million we have. These youth are growing in a transforming world. Technology, migration, climate change, conflict all reshape the societies we live in, which also forces youth to unprecedented changes and which also affects their daily lives and work. So to enlighten us about these little factors, we have with us this panelists. It's a diverse set of panelists from this representing the state, the private sector, an NGO, and of course a CSO player as well. I'm just going to read out a little statement that I found of a research that was released early this month by the Asian Development Bank Institute, where a majority of unemployed youth, which is of 48%, were from the estate sector. The study titled Strengthening Active Labour Market Policies to Drive an Inclusive Recovery in Asia. It indicated out of a total sample, 13% of unemployed youth belonged to the urban sector and 39% to the rural sector. Mr. Jayalath, I would turn the first question to you as a representative of the state. What priorities could you tell us that are being considered when planning for youth advancements in Sri Lanka and specifically for the estate sector?
Thank you, Mr. Shirantha. I think it's very timely raised question because now we have experienced a lot of recession and a lot of barriers for the access to education, especially the Tibet education and training. And also we have disadvantaged and vulnerable groups, especially in this estate sector, where I think mostly we have a great barrier of information mismatch, because most of the information that the government or the state sector or private sector offers are not reached to this estate sector youth. That's one of the barriers there. Also, if you consider the technical vocational training sector, there are a lot of avenues that they can come and recognize, because until they recognize with a certification, they are called as unskilled. This is a huge issue of youth, because they are called as unskilled and they are paid very low salaries. They cannot go to a bank or any other institution for a loan or financial facility, and they cannot apply even for formal employment. These are some of the greatest barriers that they have. And when considering the opportunities in the Tibet sector, there are a lot of opportunities, because we have started this National Vocational Qualification in 2003. Now we have streamlined courses, 6,000 courses running in a year in our institute. There are 1,300 public and private institutes offering Tibet programs, totally around 150 to 200,000 students per year. But we have seen very limited presence from the state sector because of this information gap, accessibility, maybe transportation, various issues are there. As I said, to recognize these skills, we have different avenues opened. So one is competency-based training, where youth can go to training center and get them competent, and after that they are assessed and certified. This is the formal way of doing the technical and vocational education and training. And there are some other ways. If they have the skills which they acquire through their employment or working in somewhere, they can directly get assessed and certified. This is called recognition of prior learning. The RPL, they can assess their skills and get the certification. If there are people in the industry for so long time, like 10 years or more, there is a mature candidate route. They also can face the Viva and get the qualification. And recently we have introduced in 2020 flexible learning mode, because under this flexible learning mode or FLM, we introduced the unit qualification. So they don't have to do larger course, they can do a micro credential or the small unit module, unit or the module, and they can be certified to that module. If they collect the few of these modules, they can reach to the full qualification. That is one of the beauty of this flexible learning mode, because we have developed 500 odd NVQs. Those are the occupational standards and course material and teaching learning resources as such. These are offered through this unbundling of this national competency standard. They are consist of these units. There are 10,000 units available in the database, which we could promote to at least they can earn one unit and get certified. If they certified, this is enough for doing a job. This is one of the biggest advantage that the government investment, to take the advantage out of this government investment into the development of national vocational training and various other training facilities around the island. And these are the ways and means that a person can get to acquire qualification and certification. Also we have been trying to maintain the quality as the quality assurance body for TVET sector. We maintain the quality of each and every qualification and each and every student. All these are digitalized, and if they put their NIC number, they can get all the information, the history of the student. And we have recently introduced skills passport, which is ILO, EFC and TVC joint project. In the skills passport, it is an extended qualification and with the experience. If they have, if the particular person possess the national vocational qualification and at least 1 year of experience in the particular field, they are eligible for skills passport. This is like an online profile, which we issue a small smart card. There you can scan through QR code. It directly connects to the database. The database provides all the information on person's qualification, experience, and various other extracurricular activities and so on. This is a digital profile maintained by the government agency, and we actually verify their employment history. And once the verified, we publish in our website, the Skills Passport website, and any person who is getting a particular job, and they can verify this qualification through online means. That is the beauty of this Skills Passport, that we are now promoting this digital card to the masses, and a lot of people are interested in getting these services. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jayalath, for that very descriptive response for what the state does for the youth in estates. Mr. Manjula, I would turn to you. As I read about the Bogawantalawa Tea Company's strategic plan, and your vision is to empower and prioritize youth in the community programs. What are some of these key initiatives that is undertaken by the companies for development of youth?
Thank you, Kisho. Before answering to the question, I must say the changes happening in the right round in the world, and as a tradition industry of plantation, we have identified our approach has to be different, because youth is playing a huge role in any sector. If you see other industries like apparel, telecommunication, or the other sectors, comparing with plantation sector, our approach is quite different, because since 150 years old industry, is more or less into the traditions. So I think it is a high time we take holistic approach of that. And as a responsible RPC, we have identified that. And we have communicated from top management up to the bottom the importance of change. So youth being identified, they are playing a key role. So our capacity development, we are given more priority to the youth, especially forum like Community Development Forum, we have developed through the INGOs. We give a lot of prominence to them, especially on leadership programs, team building concept. That has helped for them to develop their skills. And they are ready, even in the job market, there is any changes, they are ready to take up. So as a industry, I feel our approach towards in future should be a more or less a team concept, where most of the apparel industry has been very successful in building teams and working towards that. So our approach also should be on that angle. I feel the traditions cannot go on for so long. There is high time to change those traditions and switch on to the present day context and see how youth will take a prominent role in future. So as a company, we have taken a lot of initiative, and my panel member, as he said, we have been focusing on NVQ level, the participation of our youth to be qualified. So then they will be more recognized in the society. Other thing is, the plantation youth, they always see the dignifying of their job. So we need to think about that angle as well. So if you are developing the youth. So we have looked at all those angles, and we have given our full the company backing for them to come up and perform their expectation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manjula. Dr. Ines, I think I'll turn to you next. I'm not going in any particular order. I just have these questions. You guys are sitting right in the particular order too. So, in experience, from the private sector, why is it important for them to invest in young people? I have a follow-up question for you, but I'll let you have that first.
Sure. Thank you so much. So why I think it's so important, I mean, I think that if you're here today and you're in all the panel, I can probably feel that it's quite overwhelming about all the things the private sector and companies should get engaged in, right? In family-friendly policies, from climate change, nutrition, etc. But I honestly think if there's ever one place where companies should be really, really engaged in, it is youth development. And I think one of the reasons, I'll bring a reason from the child rights perspective, but first from the business perspective, I think it's actually because companies are best at skills. And many of you companies have survived for many, many years. That means you know what you're doing. So you have a real track record that you know what you're doing. The tea sector in Sri Lanka knows what they're doing. You have all those skills. And I think it's fundamentally important that when we talk about skill development, that the private sector, the companies themselves, are very closely involved. Because I see where this is not linked. The schools are always kind of behind what is happening in the sector. They're maybe teaching something that the sector has been doing 10 years ago, but now it has changed. And so it is really in the business where you have the newest skills, the latest methodologies, etc. And so I think from that comes this real responsibility also from the sector, which is also about their own survival, to make sure that this skill is being trained on from the beginning. And you're not getting kids from a vocational school program that was totally outdated. I've seen it in the garment sector, for example. So they go to a vocational school with these super old sewing machines, and then they go to a factory where they're having the latest, state-of-the-art sewing machines, and the kids have no idea how to use them, because that's not what they've been doing the last 6 months. They've been working on these old machines. And I think I'm sure you can apply similar things to the tea sector as well. So skills is within the private sector, and that's why it's so important to pass it on. From a child rights perspective, to have strong youth development systems for every country, I think, is absolutely fundamental. It it allows us to break some of the circle of poverty, for example, if we get youth out of vulnerable situations into decent work. And that with decent work, I mean work where they're not being exploited, work where they make enough money to survive, work where they can develop their skills. And we need to make this open, and often youth development, too often youth development, I think, is also aiming at the high achievers. So we have great entrepreneurial programs, etc. But we are often failing and getting the more vulnerable kids into integrated. The kids who don't necessarily perform super well in school, but who nevertheless need a chance at a decent work. We've seen, I'm not going to go into details on experiences now, maybe later, but we've seen that it can be a direct preventative mechanism against child labor. Because if you're a 16-year-old now anywhere in Asia and you dropped out of school 2 years ago, so you have no specific qualification, etc., the only places that will give you a chance for work will be the informal sector. And there's a really big chance you won't have a contract, you won't have any protection, you might have very long working hours, and you'll be exploited. So there's a really big chance of this happening, and a very small chance that you find anyone who says, you know what, I'm going to give you a chance. I know you don't have a specific education now, but I will give you a chance. And so that's what we need to change. We need to get to this 16-year-old and give them a chance in the formal sector, where he or she is visible, where he or she gets decent working conditions and protection.
Thank you. I'll just take you back to the first point you made on technology. And I think it's one of the key elements that the private sector and the state should focus on youth development. Any other elements that you, based on your experience, could advise or could provide some inputs?
On what they should focus on?
Yeah, what are the elements?
I mean, so obviously so there is, and I'm always a little bit careful, I think when we decide of what needs to be focused on or what do we need in these programs, we always need to make sure that both the business need and the need or the right of the children are very much aligned. And I think it only works if those two are given, right? I think one of the mistakes that, I don't want to blame anyone, but maybe the messaging from ILO has been before, I think they changed it a lot in the last 5 years, but it was all about protection of youth. And they came to business and said, you need to do this and this and this and this and this. And what happened in the industry, in many places in the formal sector, is that youth was being left out because it was too complicated for the sector to follow all those protective measures. And so they were like, okay, we're not hiring anyone under 18, for example, because then we get so many questions and we get so many problems. And so what we need to bring is a situation where we align that, where we obviously give the protection that those young kids need, because they're still children, they're 16, they're 17. They're not babies, but they're still children, so they need a certain level of protection. And we need to ensure that this is given. At the same time, we need to create conditions where it makes sense for business to invest in youth. If it's only a whole list of prohibitions, then business is going to say, why should I do that? I wait until they're 18 and then I hire them. So we need to find a balance between those two. But it is very important to have protection, and it is very important to attract them. I think that's one of the big challenges in kind of like labor-intensive fields, and agriculture in particular. It doesn't sound very sexy to be a tea plucker. It doesn't sound that this is the place where you're going to have a huge career. And so we need to find ways to create this job in a way, maybe the team approach that you just mentioned or other changes, creating these jobs in a way that youth can actually see a future in it, and that they feel appreciated, and that they feel, oh yeah, I do actually have skills, I'm valuable, etc. And so there's a lot of change, I think, that we have to do, not just on the level of protection, just from a labor rights perspective, but also from the level on how we kind of contextualize those jobs and the value that we give to those jobs.
Thank you. Kisho, I think based on the three responses and from someone who has lived around the localities of estates, what would you say are the youth's biggest challenge to engage in these initiatives provided by the state, government, NGOs, from your opinion and of course your experience?
The causes have been changes over the years, like start from the poverty actually, like young men are forced to go to job and financially support their family in the most of the cases. But today you have it's depends on, there are a lot of social elements actually influence kind of this situation. I just don't want to go to that. So, but I would love to start with the school dropout because it's one of the major root causes which is untouched, unnoticed. So I would like to give with your example, like Hatton Zonal Education has like 152 schools. In these 152 schools, there are 2,300 kids are dropping out each and every year. These are the kids those who are subject to sexual abuse, early marriage, which also leads to early divorce, and also unskilled labor force. But for some reason, it have ignored for so many people. Like, I have personal experience of pitching these ideas for like 12 years, maintaining consistency, going and meeting people and telling this story. But I mean, if you wanted to come up with a sustainable solution, it has to be a root cause that you're focusing on, not just putting up plasters in all the problems. So school dropout is one of the major cause. Second thing, VTA doesn't work for plantation community. The reason for it, these youngsters need instant money. They don't want to go and do a course for 6 months or 1 year. They doesn't have that time span. They instantly need money. So even if you want to bring them, you need to help them financially. They need something, okay? And you have to pick the right number of people for it. When I see like, oh come on, let's come and do this, or you do a program, like no matter how good that you're doing a motivation program or awareness session, the dark truth is the impact will only last long for 6 to 7 months. No matter how good that you're doing. Soon as you go to the normal environmental, boom, like everything remains same. So what's vital here is you have to create an ecosystem where everyone comes in, talk, share ideas and inspire themselves, started work on their own project. I mean, we need to think about innovation. We need to think about a startup hub, an innovation lab. I mean, I go through this newspaper, there should be a young guy who invented something on the plantation, then that's it. Even this kid will forget about this. Like, there are no adequate support for that initiative. We don't bring them into the mainstream and support with it. Like, we don't do this such things. Like, and also like everyone talk about this Highlands College in Hatton, which is one of the famous colleges. Highlands is the college which produce highest number of engineering student island-wide. Island-wide number one school. Those who produce highest number of engineering. But which is not accessible for the plantation community. Which is for the people, those who are living in Hatton. Hatton is a hub where all the business owners are staying in. There are a lot of tea estates around it, 200 plus. Okay, I'm from one of the person from the community itself. So it's not accessible for the plantation people. If you go to the school and talk to this management, they would have said like, no, we are actually following the mandatory program that we're having, but it's multiple interview sessions that you have to go through, like, which is can't be understood by a normal people from a grassroots level. So it's pointless. Okay, we're having it. We do have a national school in Hatton. We actually have 2-3 schools now. The problem with this, the implementation towards the grassroots level. I like the plan of it. Like, I go to all these fancy meetings and everything. Like, people comes with tons of ideas, but when you go to your hometown and if you see how they are implementing, like, this is not what they said, right? You know how like we've been talking about the BRC thing, like, you know, plantation community doesn't have the land rights. The bill passed before 2 years of the independence. Okay, the idea behind it, if we give the land rights to the people, Indian community, they will rule India, Sri Lanka, because India is have a big land of peace and chunk. So even though India have built more than 4,000 houses now, it doesn't have deeds. So if a young guy who has a house want to get a loan, for some stupid reason they used to ask the deed for it, for the business loan, which is not required. But they do ask like, but they doesn't have these documents in order to get a business loan. So it doesn't happen that way. So these are practical issues that I've been through and I have experienced so far. And then the lack of opportunity that I have. I mean, we have this stereotypical norm. Get a government job. What would be? It's teacher. I mean, the doctor. You know the Asian parents, right? It's same thing in the plantation community. Like in my lab, I do have a guy who's a modern contemporary artist. That's new for the plantation community. That's something new. Just this guy just came in to the lab just knowing about how to just draw, and I sort of giving an idea like this is what modern contemporary is, this is what people are focusing on, and he was working on his personal project, and he's having a solo exhibition next month 6th. So that's something new. That's what I wanted to be changed, not the basics things. Even VTA is located somewhere near to Hatton, which is in an abandoned tea factory. It's not fancy for people, right? So people have to change the mental ideology towards plantation. They're prejudging these people, and I have experienced this when I pitch this innovation lab idea to people. People have told me that it's too much for plantation. I mean, innovation is not something related to science. It can be anything. Like thumbpin is innovation, paperclip is innovation. That any can come up with this idea. You have to just support them in order to like come up with a sustainable model. So these are the biggest barriers that youth have in the plantation. It have changed over the years. It's not the basics things that we are talking anymore. Like every plantation have at least 5-6 graduates now. There are 2-3 teachers are there. They need to go to the next steps now. We are talking like a decade earlier, like all the discussions, all the ideologies that you keep in front. It's like too old for me. It sounds too old for me, because we are now planning on a modern contemporary exhibition in Hatton, and that's how Hatton have changed. So I wanted to go like that genre in the near future.
Thanks, Kisho. Mr. Manjula, I think I will go with the next question for you. As Dr. Ines said about agriculture being not sexy enough, what does the private sector do to try to engage a lot more youth in engaging in skill developments of, say, the advancements of the economies of agriculture? Especially after the wake of COVID, everyone's been focusing on agriculture. What is the private sector doing to get them more involved in these economies? If you have any ideas. Thank you.
Yeah. Answer to the question, now we need to understand the present day labor market, what's required, and especially in the plantation sector, the skill level of employees and what is the labor market requirement, there is a huge gap. So I think we need to understand that gap and need to address for that. Now, youth development programs being carried out on traditional ways. There are so many programs being conducted, but we need to assess and see those development programs has given result to us. So I feel that gap is the change what has happened in the sector itself. So there are requirements where labor market concern, especially technological advancement happen. It was not applied in plantation sector. So we need to see that and go on certain development programs, connectivity into the digital platforms, especially on technological aspect. Another important aspect being brought by Kisho for innovations. So if you look at innovation, the other sectors, they have identified how much importance of their employees bringing new ideas, idea generations. So they take up those ideas and convert into the new innovations. Where apparel sector, there are so many cases we have seen huge savings being brought by the employees itself in their companies. So we need to see where is plantation sector is there. We have seen in the plantation youth have a lot of leadership abilities, their self-determination, their self-efficacy, All these things are there. So what we need is, we need to guide them and get these ideas coming from them and convert into new innovations. Especially, we have seen certain aspect of our field activities we have digitalized, and they have adapting very quick time. So as we think earlier, the plantation sector youth in the educational level, not that, as Kisho very well mentioned, in Hatton Highland School has produced so many number of university students, we agreed. So what we need is, we need to give them a proper guidance. I think we need to have certain amount of service guidance for them, where the labor market, what is required, and we need to give them that ideas. And also, the other important thing is how we address the entrepreneurship within the estate sector. There are so many youths have come up with certain new innovations, entrepreneurship programs, and they develop themselves, and they are doing very well today. One example, in one of our estate, one youth has started doing the new innovation plucking basket, and is supplying to most of the other RPCs as well. So they have that capabilities. So what we need is, we need to focus on that and allow them to bring their new ideas. And especially when you talk about developments, what we need is new development programs linking into to supply the current demand of the labor market. So if you initially do that, I think youth can be brought into a situation where a lot of leadership skills they have. So sector itself, we can see a huge development. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manjula. Dr. Jayalath, I think I will kind of send that question your way too, because I know about that good work that's been done through the TVC, especially in terms of agriculture and how the skills are being matched for the market demand. Could you elaborate a little bit for us about the initiatives taken by TVC, please?
Yeah, for that I think I must be thank to you setting up Agriculture Sector Skills Council at the first time in Sri Lanka. Actually, Child Fund, Mr. Shirantha especially supported much to bring all the stakeholders in the agriculture sector into one council, which responsible for skills development, how to harness the skills into the vocational training sector, what are the new developments needed, supply, demand, gaps, and what areas that they could help to the agriculture sector. Especially agriculture sector engineering courses that we have established, the diploma level, certificate level, NVQ level 1 to 4, 5, 6. These are very much in demand for various sectors. But for levels like 1, 2, 3, which is very much at this skills level, the attraction of youth are not up to the level, because the recognition, social recognition is a key factor in this area, because if somebody is doing a particular job and he is performing up to the expectations of the employer, we have to say this particular person is skilled. They are not unskilled, because still we do this myth or the misconception, they are like unskilled, underskilled or semi-skilled. It is not the case, because in NVQ framework we have 7 levels. In each level is defined in terms of the complexity of work in a particular person's doing the job, the responsibility that he takes during his job, and the learning demand, how much knowledge and entrepreneurial skills to be learned to deliver this job or perform this job successfully. This is how we do the leveling of particular qualifications. So level 1 person is also a skilled person. He's not level 1 person. You can imagine, maybe you are thinking who is level 1 person. The person who is doing very repetitive and highly supervised work is a level 1 person. So he is also a very much required person, because this is like an engine. If you don't have one element, we cannot work or we can run this engine, because he is doing a very important job in a particular organization, and without his service, his or her service, this engine cannot run. Because of that, everyone's effort or the performance is very much needed and expected, and we have to recognize this job, and we have to give particular the level, because if a person performs the job, we can give these levels after assessing and recognizing and certification. So once certificates are given, he or she is a skilled person, is recognized skills, so that they can move upward in the career ladder, or their potential for a better employment is very high. So that we have to introduce this kind of information or the opportunities to the youth of these sectors, because sometimes people expect them to do a father's job. It is not the case, because we have to give an option for them to choose whatever the profession or career that they would like to go on. We have developed a career interest test, which is a very scientific test. This is online available, and this they have to answer 62 questions. Once they answer these all questions, this test gives what they are good at. Like if they are good at scientific, socially, technically, or psychomotor, practical, all these areas are identified, and thereafter we provide the guidance, what are the courses available for this interest. There is a TVET guide which contains 6,000 courses in registered training centers around the island. So they can go to particular training center. The daytime courses, all public sector daytime courses are free of charge. Government is heavily investing in this TVET sector. Even private sector is very competitive rates. They can be enrolled and take a course. If they are in a particular employment without a certificate, they can, as I said, they can ask for recognition of prior learning, certification, and various other means of getting them certified. And they are empowered. Once they are empowered with skills, there is always skills mobility, because that is also very important. If they can bring this skills mobility to a new height, so maybe nationally or internationally, that is very much helpful. We are doing 2 projects to expand the skills mobility. One is from ILO, that is South Asian Regional Qualification Referencing Framework, which is coming in the SAARC region with South Asian countries, as mapping all these qualification framework into one framework. That is one project, and that framework will be linked to ASEAN qualification framework and the European qualification framework. So in future there will be great mobility of skills for the Sri Lankan youth. And also we have started under EU funding international recognition or international accreditation of Sri Lankan qualification framework. That is one area that we are looking at to see what are the gaps that are available in our system and how we can pitch the international accreditation. That is very much needed to recognize our skills, and in future we will have mutual recognition of qualifications with other countries. Those are the 2 important projects that we are carrying on now. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Kisho, the other end of employability for youth, social entrepreneurship is a key element in your work, and of course a pathway for youth to gain employability. Would you tell us about the participatory approach that you take with youth and some of the good work, of course, you do for us to understand, please?
So, generally, youth, not in the plantation sector, generally everyone has this problem. Like, I met this guy once in a school, and he said, I asked him what you wanted to be, and he said, I want to be a singer. Then I asked, what sort of dream that you dream of every day? And he said, I'm performing in right front of a big crowd, and girls are screaming my name, I'm doing autograph and everything, yeah. Then I understand young guys always decide on the end results, not the process, right? You're supposed to love the process in order to maintain consistency. I mean, it's all about the love, it's not about the money, right? I mean, Abdul Kalam is famous not about the money, right? It's different, right? It's not always about the money. So I designed this program called Unleash Your Potential, which pretty much help them to unleash who they are, what they are capable of, what they wanted to do first. Then I bring them to my lab, which is located in Hatton, and I normally use the design thinking mechanism for it because I love it. It's so good. You put whatever into it, you can come up with a sustainable idea. So that's how design thinking works. So we just do a design thinking workshop, and I have created the innovation lab, and all the initiative that I've done is self-funded. It's no funding, outsource and everything. So I have to come up with a sustainable idea for it. So I call all my friends and design a mentoring organization which people will come on board and help voluntarily. So now I have on board lecturers, those who are working on robotics, I have graphic designers, I have people, those who are working on Java, Python, and we do have everyone. So soon as we develop an idea, I'll direct them to the mentors, and throughout the whole thing, I'll give you an example. A guy came in and he said he wanted to help the farmers, and soon as we put this idea into it, and the end results would be a app where you can purchase vegetable without a middleman, right? Which way you can support the farmers as well, and also like people, those who are purchasing it for a cheaper price as well. So it's a win-win thing. So in order to achieve this, you need to know how to develop app. He doesn't know that. And you want to know how about the marketing, how to like financing and everything. You know, startup is all about everything, right? So it took 2 months. I was working him continuously with him, and there were a lot of mentors, those who on board supported him, and we end up getting a grant after 3 months, which is 1 million, and we are going to start the business by next month. So that's a success case. Like, so what general course is lacking in that, in the case, in the sense means, okay, I wanted to do this, why do I have to study this? I mean, which is totally irrelevant for me. Like, but if you really focus on like specific areas, you can achieve things in a very short term span. And also we started this art lab where we have a lot of like young guys with an idea. So one guy came up with an idea of, it's called the manipulative of leeches. That's how we call the exhibition. So it's all about the leeches, which is direct with some of the social elements which I don't want to tell. But the idea was really cool. I really liked the idea. So then I thought, okay, if you want to be an artist, it's not about drawing, it's about having a depth ideas about everything. So we started to have discussions about social problems, issues, how plantation community work, how politicians work, how the whole structure works. I mean, this is so important to come up to express your idea towards art. So we again decide this and design this idea by using the design thinking mechanism. It's about empathizing, considering all the stakeholders and coming up with sustainable ideas. And I have done this project called Hills of Neglect, which took 7 years to complete. It's a documentary photography exhibition that we hope to do it in 11th of December, which is all about like awareing people about the school dropout and some of the untouched areas of the plantation community. It took 2 years to pitch everyone and end up being not getting anyone bored. So I end up spending my own money and doing the exhibition by myself. That's how system works. It's sad, but someone has to break the stereotype. Someone has to tell the stories. I mean, if I do that, it create a path to the guys, those who in my lab, right? So they can come on board and do exhibitions in Colombo. That's what I wanted to do with the innovation lab. So, and also we done 2 other special projects. So one is called Feed the Children. It's a very, very amazing project. One guy came to is one of the members of my lab and told me like, there were kids got faint in the school because of they are not having food meal. Okay. So I said, what you want to do? And he said, I want to do a research, but he doesn't know how to do a research. So I taught him like how to do a research, and he came up with a research which is not properly done, but we somehow find 10 out of 6 kids are underweight in the plantation during the pandemic. Okay. So there were issues. So we corrected it and done the whole research, and we find out like 10 out of 9 kids are underweight. So now it's not about hunger, right? When it's underweight, it's not about hunger. Now it's about nutrition. It's about a lot of other issues which is interrelated. We doesn't have the fund to support this project, but we met and had discussions with all the non-profits. We end up being a success that all these 114 schools in attendance on education are getting midday meal from other organization fundings. Okay, 114 is, it's for 60 days, which is already passed out. So I'm really glad these guys came up with an idea of doing that. So not just business, right? It's about everything that but I don't like this fact. Sorry if I'm wrong, like I don't like that people, those who are sitting in Colombo and deciding about plantation community, it's not fair. You can't do it, man. People always say this word, Kisho, I get it. No, you don't. You can't. You can't, like, it's different. It's different, like, I always say this, it's been 2 years that I'm pitching this idea, and it's really hard. It's mentally challenging, right? You always think the things go in your mind. What if I fail? I have a 5-year-old daughter. Every single time when I go to bed, the only thing that comes to my mind, it has to be a success story that I want to tell to my daughter. Okay? It's not easy. It's not easy. When I was 18, started this thing by my own self, I thought like, people are going to celebrate me. So I started doing school dropout awareness program. I thought people will come on board. It's 15 years, 300 plus programs, 1,500 guidance and counseling for sexual abuse victims, all alone. No one came on board. So that's what it's more important for me to create an ecosystem. Okay, so what if I can't do it for a long term? So because I have family, I have to take care. So if I create an ecosystem that inspire the people, that's the whole idea of creating a lab. When I do an awareness program, my success rate is like 2%. If there's 100 people, I will only listen. That 2 guys will listen to my thing and will inspire another 200 people. That's the whole idea when you do something. This is what reality looks like. Right? It's not like, I don't want it to be sugarcoat and manipulate, like this is how things work, blah, blah, blah. No, right? This is how things work. It hurts. It really hurts. Like, I have like 1,500 individual guidance and counseling for sexually abused victim. I gone through a lot. I know how important that for me. That's what it helped me to maintain a consistency, somehow fight this and do this exhibition, because it's not about photography. It's about telling a story to people. There are a lot of unreachable, unnoticed, untold stories around the globe that you have a responsibility to tell the people the exact story to come up with sustainable solution. Not just putting plasters to it. It has to be very sustainable. That's what design thing comes in and plays a role, because it has to be a sustainable business model. Because when you talk about social entrepreneurship, it's create revenue that help you to like go for a long term. So still you're supporting the social problems as well. We created this handmade cosmetic brand called Saban Natural, so which we used to export, which is made by the sexually abused victims. But it didn't work out due to so many reasons, like the pandemic. We had to face a lot of financial barriers because it was organic. We were exported the project to Maldives, and the hotels were closed. The shelf lives were 8 months. Boom, like everything is gone. Like it's not my fault, not the buyer's fault, so we couldn't get the money back. But still, it was a valid idea. Like it's somehow supporting some of the social causes. That's what more important thing here. Like it's about creating a startup hub, an innovation lab, something social entrepreneurship supportive thing. The things has to change. Like when we talk about innovation, like we talk about mobile and we talk about automobile. Mobile is like 100 times more developed than the automobile. Not because that we are not spending much more time on automobile. No, it's because that we have absorbed the idea. Because you use it every day, right? You use it every day. So you absorb the idea. But when it comes to social change, still we build libraries, still we give giveaways. They're lacking in innovation when it comes to social change. There should be a big innovative changes towards social change in order to build a sustainable future. Just stop doing this same stereotypical thing that we've been doing it for over and over the years, because we know these are not working, right? These are not working. So it has to be something sustainable.
Thanks, Kisho. Thanks for exposing that dark truth.
Come on, people.
Yeah, I think yeah, that deserves a round of applause. Yeah? So I believe we're almost at the end of the session. Shall I ask the last question from?
So ask question, please.
Yes, you will. Yes, you definitely will have the time.
We are actors. We don't want
Yes,
to
you
be just
definitely.
passive onlookers.
Yeah, of course,
Please
of course.
make us participate.
You definitely shall.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Dr. Ines, I think the last question for you would be to you. In your experience with the center, and I think there's a lot of private sector players here, so maybe some of the good programs that have been done that have benefited both the youth and the business, that maybe some of our colleagues here and on viewers could take back.
Thank you. I'll try to be very short so we have time for questions and interventions. I think I want to share two things, and I first must agree it's hard, and probably what we're doing is not as hard as what you're doing, but it is hard. But there are some successes, and obviously I'm trying to hang on to those and promote those because they worked. One thing, at one point we did a child rights impact assessment in timber plantations in Laos. And as you can imagine, any sort of work in a timber plantation is hazardous, given that you're dealing with big machinery, etc. So it's not. So one of the things we saw is that the youth in these areas had no opportunities, and the business that generally the timber plantations brought was not a business where we could say, oh, you guys should hire some of the 16-year-olds, because clearly that didn't work. But then we started to look into and really sit down with them and said, what can we do? And so one of the things we then saw is that this company was very engaged, and they had a lot of nurseries, like tea nurseries, not children, like tree nurseries, where they were preparing the next crop of trees. And so we were saying, like, this is it. And so what they've done now, and this is really is one company, but what they've done now in this area is that their tree nursery has become a vocational center. It's not actually linked to the national vocational system because there is no tree nursery course, but they created their own course, and they now have every year. So basically, the tree nurseries are now run by teachers and by the youth that is engaged there, and that obviously creates us so much skills, so much knowledge, so much pride also of the trade that they're doing. There's obviously a lot of issues, etc. around it, but it really created that connection. And it now creates opportunity in this village for about 20 positions of learning every year. And that's significant for a village. That's 20 dropout kids who get a chance to do a very meaningful, nice work in a very safe environment. So I thought that was a really, and that's continued. We did an intervention with them for about 3 months, and ever since then this is running, and every year new youth can join this program, so it's really sustainable. And another very good example, And hopefully it's going to grow as well, because it's always the question also about scale, right? So we get successful in certain areas. And I want to say as we said, there's a lot of youth development programs out there. And I think a lot of times where they fail is because they don't link to the business, right? So we're making these motivational programs, we're making great training, and we're telling youth, and we're teaching them how to do CVs, etc. And then they go and use them, and then nobody's there and listening, and nobody hires them. And so what we've been doing with IKEA, the big Swedish furniture company, who had a very strong youth program in their stores, we said, you need to bring this into your sourcing countries as well, because it seems fundamentally unfair that you're investing so much, like, let's say, in a European market, they're very strong. They have, like in Switzerland, where I come from, they have a strong apprenticeship program, etc. And so we've been working with them in different countries, and we're now working with more and more companies, but they've been the first to do that, where we work with the factories and train first the factories on how to accommodate youth within their factories and what kind of ongoing training they need to offer. That's both skill training, like hard skill training and what they need to know, but it's also soft skill training. So we're training their human resource management, etc. on those points. And once they're ready, they then go out and make these jobs available to vulnerable youth in the communities. And we've been making a point that we don't want factories necessarily to then hire 200-300 youth at once, because we want the youth to have the protection. But we want a lot of factories to hire groups of youth into those programs. And the outcome has been really fabulous, and which is why IKEA is now extending this program worldwide, is because it was fabulous for the factory because they did better in human resource management, because they had to revise a lot of things how they were doing. They started to improve positions that were hazardous previously and started to find ways to make them non-hazardous, which, for example, meant using different, for example, one ceramics companies use different paint, so it made it more safe for everyone. But also, which was actually very surprising, it created so much positive goodwill in the community, because the community suddenly perceived this factory as somebody who helped them develop. And many of the workers actually started to bring in and said, "Oh, I have a cousin. He's kind of on the wrong path. He's working in a bar at night in Ho Chi Minh City. In this case of this story, can we get him in to this program?" And the factory then said, "Yeah, let him apply." And then he was in this program, and so suddenly they were like, "Wow, they're doing something for my family, etc." So he created such a positive vibe within the factory. And obviously created a lot of positive impact on the children themselves. Not all of them will stay for 25 years in the factories, but they became an opportunity, or have received an opportunity to do a job where they're respected, where they're making some money, and I agree with that. I think it's in another context. Most of them, in order for them to be a real opportunity, they need to be paid from the get-go, because otherwise we're already excluding a whole group of people. And so they had this possibility. They made a decent wage. They had a contract. They had protection. And for example, one factory, remember, they did management and entrepreneurial courses with the owner of the factory, and that was like super motivating for these young kids to see where potentially they could go to, etc. So it really created such a positive impact. And this is a very good example for me, and I'm talking about this all the time to everyone nearly around the world, because it's such an important element that business gets engaged in these areas. And I think where business can have such a tremendous positive impact on the next generation and also on themselves.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think now we've come to the segment where you all can ask the questions. It's not just me talking and them. Can I have some hands? Yes, sir. If you could please mention your name and an organization you represent, please.
Jane. So I'm Patrick Van Bruyne from the Development Partner Secretariat and former Save the Children Fund, by the way. But anyway, first, probably one statement and one question. The statement is that in my many years in Sri Lanka, and still today, I see that vocational training even among officials of government, of a lot of international organization, of NGO, that is still for the youth that has failed, is unable to access the formal, higher education, and this is still there. So maybe somebody may want to react to that. But so that, and I hope we can change it. But my question is to Dr. Jayalath, and maybe also to Mr. Samarakoon of the TST. Now, has anyone done an assessment to find, asking the tea pluckers how far they like tea plucking, and how far they want their daughters, because here it's mainly daughters, to continue tea plucking? So that's one thing. I don't know if any organization maybe has done that. And here we are speaking about skill development. So when I see how the tea plucking is going on, I would expect that a number of them would actually want their daughters to do something else. But tell me if I'm wrong. So if it is so, and now if we are successful in developing, in having skill development and young people from the plantation to do other things, and with all the efforts that we heard, surely we're going to have less and less tea pluckers. So what's the plan? Is there a plan? Are we genuinely helping the young women of tomorrow to stop tea plucking and do other things? Are we genuinely getting involved in this? Because if we are, then there'll be less tea pluckers. So I'm a bit unclear. It may sound a bit of a silly question, but I'm a bit unclear about the plan. Surely you are confronted with these challenges. So would you like, please, to comment on that? Thank you.
Yeah. Answering to your question, I mentioned the present environmental factors where we need to see the dignity of workers. I specially mentioned, and if you ask from a plucker, as you mentioned, whether their daughters or son is willing to work in the estate, 90% will say no. I agree with you, because we need to understand change happen in the environment. So that's where our industry has traditions. It has been. So I told that it need to change, and even from the pluckers, what we call as a plucker, the title has to be changed as a harvester or something like that, and we have to dignify them in a different way. And they like other industries, how they treated when they go for work. There are many advantages. They have given special the motivational factors like best employee of the month, and so many encouragement from HR side. So as a companies, we also understood there has to be changes to keep our workforce in the estate itself. So the changes has to happen on more dignified way, especially starting from the title. I think we need to call them in time to come more dignified title like harvester. And also, since mechanization is happening, we need to give them a special the uniforms, like how they dress when you come for the work. Certain type of things we need to address. So not only that, I think in other aspect in HR has to come into the ground level. As you mentioned, not in the head office level, it has to come to the ground level and see and get the feedback what they really want and what are the causes of workers leaving out of plantation. We need to address that. So as a responsible RPC, we also have understood that, and we are addressing that situation. Again, come to a question. The young generation expectations are quite different. in any sector, we need to understand that as well. So overall, I think we need to have some sort of a change approach to bring them to a certain level of dignity as employment of the plantation sector.
So I am Tusita from Chrysalis. So my question also very relevant to the same question. So now as a regional plantation companies, so do you have any sort of plan to utilize this youth segment for any sort of other, for example, you can think about more about diversification going for different pensions. You have some sort of lands without cultivating tea, you can utilize for different businesses. So do you have any sort of plan like this to utilize this youth segment for different sort of businesses and improve your productivity?
Yeah, definitely yes. As a Bogawantalawa, we have the uncultivated areas and we have developed into a lot of agricultural ventures. We have started certain joint ventures as well. So we have given priority for the youth for employment on those ventures. So we have identified that type of situations, and as a company, we have a lot of plans when we come up with new ventures, especially to give chance for the youth. So we have considered that.
If you don't mind, I maybe can add to some thoughts or experience which I've seen in a different sector, and because I think that issue that you mentioned about that these jobs are not particularly attractive, that the most parents don't necessarily want their children to do the same, and that if we are then sincere and, for example, invest on tea plantations on all these other skills and potentially undermining our own sector, if I'm a tea plantation sector now, that's a thorough one, and I think it's one that many industries are facing. And I saw some interesting experiences, and Think Save the Children was involved in this as well in Indonesia with on cocoa plantations. And what they're trying to do there, it's particularly one American company has been very, very engaged in that. But what they've been trying to do is creating a system where you do have people investing in, like, and have farmers and working on the farms, but at the same time created this group around youth where it was more going into the entrepreneurship. So the youth would be working on cocoa plantations during the week, but they would on the side also run their own business on cocoa. And so, for example, then they would have local markets where they would sell their own cocoa products that they themselves produced. And so they created more ownership and pride of this industry. And really made kind of this farming much more interesting, because it wasn't just working for an employer, going there starting at 8 and working until 4 o'clock, picking something, but it was actually part of their own entrepreneurship, and depending on how much money they could make with their own companies, they would maybe invest more, and if it didn't succeed so well, they maybe would invest more in working for a company and just selling it more in the traditional sense. But I thought that was just a really interesting way of how they were trying to kind of link those two ideas together and really finding the innovation within the sector, so they're not undermining the sector by, for example, just teaching them other things. But I also had an interesting discussion this morning with Johan, I don't know if you want to share, but where there seems to be a real future for a lot of different skills on tea plantation. And so that again, if the tea sector is getting modernized, then we might have a development where you stay in that sector and you work in that sector, but it might not be in the traditional way, also if plucking is being modernized, etc. But I don't want to, I'm not a tea expert, so maybe you want to say something to that.
Thank you. Maybe just to also add to the first gentleman's question about if there was any study done to understand the youth's interest. To be honest, just about 4 years ago, when we were starting the implementation of an EU-funded project focusing on 4 agricultural value chains, we did a focus group discussion with about 1,500 youth, and none of them showed an interest in engaging in agriculture. But merely because they did not know the different dimensions of what agriculture sector could be involved in. And the moment we educated them about agriculture technology, we have now over 2,500 scholarships provided. The project is ended, it ended about 6 months ago. But we had over 2,500 recipients who are now also engaged in a company or set up their own establishment as an entrepreneur, focusing on 4 value chains, that is dairy, cocoa, cinnamon, and potato. So you have ice cream makers, you have yogurt makers, butter, chocolates, all sorts of trades, value-added products that I think the estate youth or the mass population, if they know what are the opportunities existing, they would engage in it. It's the mere problem of not being aware, just as Mr. Jayalath and actually all our panelists mentioned as the key challenges. Thank you. Just wanted to add out there.
Yeah,
So you had one question.
I have a question. So I'm Kaushalya, an attorney at law, and I'm from Equal Ground, Sri Lanka. This is a direct question to Mr. Kisho. I wanted to understand your experience. Expanding on the first question that was asked, we were talking about young girls, especially maybe school dropouts. Are they given the options or shown the options that they could go, like what Mr. Shirantha, the examples that he gave? Are they shown where they can lead to then be limited to becoming another harvester or a home developer, taking care of kids, or something like that? And my second question is, what are there any programs in schools or after schools to have people with the language barriers we have in Sri Lanka, from someone coming from Hatton, especially when they're not speaking a link language? How do you overcome these kind of challenges? That's my questions to you. Thank you.
So the first one would be like, you have to bring them to a space and help them to understand what the world looks like, right? Because they live in a very, very small society, the plantation housing system, which is not a housing system at all, right? Which is literally in middle of the tea plantation estate. So they can't actually feel the diversity of it. They doesn't have the ability to go and talk to other people and experience the diversity and empathize others and understand what their other society and cultural norms. So which is a big part which is lacking in the plantation, because when you look at villages, the plantation, it's not a village, right? It's so totally different. During the pandemic, everyone told do a home garden or whatever it is, but plantation is different. We don't have pullers, we don't have jackfruits, so it's totally different. So as I already told you, it's better we don't have that scale to do it, but it's better if we can bring them to a spot where they can diversify and understand what the real world is like. I always used to do this example. I'll talk about Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk and stuff. People doesn't know who Mark Zuckerberg is, but I like that part because that's the opportunity that they can learn about Mark Zuckerberg, right? So in that way, people believe this, okay, it's a huge lot of space that you can go and discover by yourself. There are no barriers. You have a totally creative freedom to do whatever that you want. So creating a space like that is really vital, because I think this people, when it comes to innovation, there are two ground rules, okay? Taking risk and breaking laws. I think the people, those who come from the grassroots, are the perfect people for innovation, because they already been struggling, okay? And the kids, those who drop out from the school, they're good at taking risk and breaking laws, right? These are the perfect type of group people that you can change into an innovator. So it's not the hardest task, it's quite easy. To the second question, no, we don't have any programs. It's sad, the school dropout itself, we have a school attendance committee. The zonal director is the president of the attendance committee, but I never seen an active attendance committee, those who are working towards that initiative. That's really sad, right? So it's not even we have launched this project called sexual education recently. For the first 2 weeks it was hell. People really didn't get the whole idea of it, so it's been really hard to implement such initiatives with a very limited resource, but you're trying to reach a big audience and stuff. So but basic humanity is needed, because sexual education, reproductive health is one of the biggest areas that really we need to focus on, since we have the highest number of teenage pregnancy in the plantation community. Please don't trust the census because the cases which is solved between the society, which is known as the off the record cases, it won't add up with the census. The cases in the police station and the cases in the courts are the only cases which it comes to the census. Okay, so there's a huge number of sexual abuse, exploitation in the plantation community that need very serious attention to it. It's a very, very serious problem. We also have experience that if there's a girl got abused, the ideal solution would be in the plantation community get into another marriage. Okay, so there would be a pseudo father come into the picture and get married to this girl. Mental health is not a health in the plantation at all. Like, she's already been going through a lot. There should be a psychiatric therapist. We don't even have a psychiatric doctor in Dika base hospital. Okay, so it doesn't even consider. So in that case, like, those are the vital part that we need to focus on, that we really would love to like introduce this idea to the schools, but not with if you can get like more support, people will coming on board, like we can like expand these areas a bit, but now the scale is very, very small. Like, yeah.
Thank you. I believe we have a lot of topics and a lot of areas that we can keep talking about. Unfortunately, we have only 30 seconds left for the session. So I would like to thank the distinguished panelists for gracing this session. Thank you very much. And of course, the great questions. And thank you very much. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Have a lovely day.